Hi, my name's Mel and welcome back to Bookish Brummie. So today I thought we'd talk about my little trip last week to Stratford Literary Festival. So for people that haven't heard of it, Stratford Literary Festival happens 2 times a year, often in around about the May time and then the end of October, beginning of November time, in a town called Stratford upon Avon in the UK. Some of you have probably heard of that if you've ever heard of William Shakespeare, because that's obviously his hometown. Now, the Literary Festival in Stratford has been going on for quite some time, but I started attending at the beginning of this year, so I went for the first time in May, and it's quite easy for me to get to as well, which is a bit of a benefit, but I also find that the guest list and the talkers that are at Stratford Literary Festival to always be really relevant to the kind of books that I like to read. So when I went in the May time, I was actually went because I saw that Jacqueline Wilson was doing a talk about her new book, Think Again. So you might know Jacqueline Wilson wrote books for teenagers mainly, and they were about a group of teenage girls who were essentially just trying to navigate turning into a teenager and their years at the beginning years of high school really. And the girls in those books were around about my age at the time I was reading them, so they were like 12, 13, 14 years old. And I hadn't read a Jacqueline Wilson book for 25 years, nearly 30 years. Obviously the books are a little bit young now for me. However, Jacqueline had a really good idea and thought, what if I take the characters from that book and I age them and I make it so they're about to turn 40 and write an adult book about these characters as they're turning 40, which to me was really relevant because I'm really not far from 40 because I was the same age as these characters roundabout. So I really wanted to go and see her talk about that and what inspired her to go and do that. So we could actually maybe talk about that book later on the channel. But yeah, this is how I got, I became aware of Stratford Literary Festival because they'd had Jacqueline Wilson talking, and that seemed like such a big name to me, like somebody who was so relevant to me that I really wanted to see speak, and this was at the beginning of the year. And I was delighted to find that Stratford Literary Festival actually happens twice a year. Now I've heard that the May sessions normally have bigger keynote speakers, but actually the keynote speakers were absolutely massive for the autumn showing of Stratford Literary Festival. There were so many names talking there, and I have to be honest, when I actually tried to book one of my tickets, the website had crashed. So we'll start off, I think, with one of the biggest names that was there, and that was John Cleese. So John Cleese recently brought out a book about his best moments in Fawlty Towers. Now he's obviously been a writer and a comedian for a very long time. Fawlty Towers is an extremely popular comedy in the UK, at least anyway. But he was also involved in writing the Monty Python series, which I think are pretty much well known throughout the world. Now John Cleese is such a big name, and I really knew that I wanted to go and see him do a talk. So I had set my alarm for the timer for when these tickets would go on sale to the general public, because I just knew that everybody would want to see him talk, and I wasn't wrong. So within 2 minutes of the timer going off and the tickets going on sale, I had nearly finished my order, and I was trying to book 2 tickets for the front of the auditorium, and I was told that there was not enough tickets for me to book a ticket in front of the auditorium, so I had to book a ticket in the back of the auditorium. So I managed to get those tickets, which I was extremely grateful for. A couple of minutes later, I tried to re-enter the site because I wanted to buy tickets for another author, and the whole website had crashed. I tried to call and I had to wait quite a while on the phone to go through to somebody to try and book the next set of tickets. So that just proves like what a big name, what big names they actually had at that festival. I mean, who ever heard of a literary festival like the website crashing? But I think if you're going to have somebody as big as John Cleese speaking, everybody wanted a part of that, because I think John Cleese obviously transcends writing as such, because there's so many people who are attracted to him because of his comedy and the things that he's written for TV. So that was the beginning of my experience, was trying to book the ticket to John Cleese. The other author of great note to me who I also wanted to see was Sir Philip Pullman, who was talking a couple of days after John Cleese. So I actually had to ring up and book those tickets through a person rather than through the internet, because I think John Cleese had crashed the internet. However, it might not have been John Cleese that crashed the internet, because there were a couple of other big names, like really big names actually, that were talking. There was Tony Robinson, who was talking about his new book Wolf. He was making an appearance. Graham Norton also made an appearance, and so did Nicola Sturgeon. So those are just some of the big names that I can remember, but there were lots and lots and lots of authors who were having sessions at Stratford Literary Festival. So I'm not surprised really that the phone lines got tied up and the website crashed. The important thing is I got the tickets to the two people that I really wanted to see at the festival, which was John Cleese and Sir Philip Pullman. So I think that I will start off the talk obviously with John Cleese, because John Cleese is the first person that I saw out of the two of them. It was extremely busy. It was actually really hard. It would have been difficult to see, but they put TVs along the room so that you could actually see if you were sat really far back like I was. It was an absolutely sold out event, and it's the first time I've ever seen John Cleese in public, and I thought he was a really, really nice man. I think one of the things that I enjoyed about seeing him is he was asked a question about the sort of things that make him laugh. So he was having a bit of a chuckle at stuff. And then he started chuckling to himself again, like a bit later on after he'd said something. And, you know, for a man who has spent decades making the British public laugh, and, you know, hopefully everybody else, it was really nice to actually hear him laugh. And he came across really, really, really well. The book that he's written, it's good because it talks about like his favourite moments in the show, but it also has stuff in here like this about the set design and about different scenes between some of the characters. So it's sort of got the script written in there for ones that sort of made John Cleese laugh. And I'm assuming there's going to be some conversation here like there was on stage about people around the show as well. So the fact that Fawlty Towers was actually based on a real hotel down in Torquay, and a real hotel owner that was running that hotel. So there's a bit of information about that in the show as well, which I really enjoyed listening to. So yeah, I can't really say much more about the John Cleese one. A lot of it was just, you know, about the sort of things that he finds funny, a little bit of his political views, how he finds, what would you say, like comedy writing now for TV, things like that. So I think like there's not much I can really say about it without just parroting exactly like what he said. I don't have any opinions on what he said. I just enjoyed listening to him answer some of the questions, and I think like my favourite part of it was, as I said, listening to him laugh, but also listening to him to talk a little bit about his relationships with some of the other characters, like Manuel, who's always like one of my favourite characters. So the second speaker that I saw at Stratford Literary Festival was Sir Philip Pullman. Now, Philip was doing a talk on his new book, The Rose Field, which is the end of the Book of Dust trilogy. So, I sort of mentioned this on the channel before when I've spoken about Philip Pullman, but we'll talk again. So, Philip Pullman is responsible for the Dark Materials trilogy, which is The Northern Lights, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass. Now, these are my copies that I had from when I was really, really young. So actually this copy is from 1998. So it's like 26 years old? Around about 26, 25 years old? I don't know if I've mathed that correctly suddenly on camera. But yeah, that's roughly how old this copy was. And I'm really glad that I've still got these original copies. But if you look from online now, they've got new covers, more recent ones. So yeah, he wrote this trilogy about a girl called Lyra Silvertongue and her familiar Pantalaimon, and they were really, really gripping, and he won some awards with this as well. Like the Amber Spyglass won the Whitbread Book of the Year in 2001, and the Northern Lights also won an award. I can't remember which one it was, but they were all sort of children's literature awards. And then you would think that he was done with Lyra after that, but he didn't. He then went on to write a second trilogy, which was called The Book of Dust. So you had the Book of Dust 1, which was La Belle Sauvage, and then you had the Book of Dust 2, which was The Secret Commonwealth. And the Belle Sauvage, the first Book of Dust, actually predates this book because it's when Lyra's a baby. And then The Secret Commonwealth comes after The Subtle Knife, because it's when Lyra is sort of 16, 17 years old. And now the Rosefield, which is the conclusion to that trilogy, follows on from the Book of Dust and the story that's going on in the Book of Dust. I was really excited, obviously, for the conclusion of this trilogy, because this has been a trilogy that's been in the making for like the last 30 years or so. So it was really interesting to see Philip Pullman talk about Lyra, what he thinks about her, what he thinks about her character, and how he's made her grow, because he's literally written about her as a baby and then as a young child, I mean about 10 years old, and then obviously as she's beginning to grow up and become an adult. So he's obviously quite attached to her, and clearly because he wrote a second trilogy in the Book of Dust trilogy. So he was asked during that show if he's now finished with Lyra and if there will be any more books, and he said that he thinks he's finished with her for now, but don't take that as gospel, because he thought he was finished after the first Dark Materials trilogy. You know, and I would say that he's probably quite attached to that character, so who knows, we may get some more, we may not. He did a reading from the book as well, which I really enjoyed. It's nothing like listening to an author actually do the voices of the characters that they've written. You obviously, when you're reading in your head, you sort of have a voice for your character, but you don't entirely know what the author is sort of thinking when they're writing it and what's going on in their head. So having him do some of the pronunciations and get really excited about what he was reading, like that was really worth it, and I really enjoyed his talk. His talk was more about his book, whereas John Cleese's talk was more about his life, which is understandable, because I think John Cleese's book is about his career and of creating Fawlty Towers, whereas obviously the Book of Dust is about Lyra, and it's about a world that Philip has created, which is why the two talks were a little bit different. So I'd said last week that I wanted to read the Book of Dust within this last month, but I had not yet got a copy of the book. So what I was hoping to do is I was hoping to get a copy of the book while I was at the Stratford Literary Festival, because I was hoping that there would be a signed copy, or that Philip Pullman would be doing a signing. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. There were no signed copies and he didn't sign a book, so I didn't actually buy one while I was at the festival. Although my John Cleese one is signed. And I actually had a small conversation with John Cleese as well, which I think totally made my weekend. But yeah, unfortunately I couldn't say that the same happened with Philip Pullman. I don't know why the decision was made that he wasn't going to sign the books. I was really hoping that, you know, after the last 3 decades of sort of following this story, that the final book, like the book-ended one, I would get a signed copy. So yeah, that's not the case. So I've actually ordered the book online now. It's quite a big one, so it's not really one you want to carry around with unless you need to. And that should be arriving in the next few days. So I still, as of now, I still have not actually read this book or started reading the Book of Dust, but it is my priority to start reading it. This book came out on the 23rd of October, and I delayed buying it because I thought I'm going to get a signed copy at Stratford Literary Festival, and then obviously I couldn't get one, so now I've had to order it, so now I'm having to wait for it to come online. And it feels like when the last Harry Potter came out and everybody rushed to the store to buy that book, I was included in that number, and that's how I feel about this book that Philip Pullman has written for the conclusion of the second Lyra trilogy. So I felt really invigorated by Stratford Literary Festival and getting to see 2 people who I really respect. John Cleese is, you know, one of my favourite comedians on TV, and I don't think I was expecting to see his name at Stratford Literary Festival, so that was such a nice surprise to see him there. And then Sir Philip Pullman is somebody whose work who I really appreciate, and it's one that I've been following obviously since I was a child. Up until now I'm an adult. The Lyra character means quite a lot to me, so to see him talk about her and to hear him doing a reading from his book was absolutely brilliant. So I really would look into Stratford Literary Festival if you're looking for, you know, modern and relevant authors and also quite big authors. I have seen some literary festivals around in the Midlands in the UK that, you know, they might appeal to some people, but they just didn't have writers that appealed to me. Whereas Stratford Literary Festival, the last 2 sessions that they've had, the one in the May and the one in the autumn, the beginning of autumn, have been absolutely spot on. I might even consider going for a couple of days, because they normally run for 4 days. They normally run from the Thursday to the Sunday, so if you get time off work, you know, you could go all day for all the talks on the Thursday, the Friday, the Saturday and the Sunday. So I just wanted to talk about that, because obviously we talk about books on this channel, but I also like to talk about writers and events that I've been to that are quite bookish. So one of the other things that I wanted to do while we were on this particular session is that while I was at Stratford Literary Festival, they also have a charity, so they're sort of run by a charity, and they had a date with a book. And so I, you know, for a donation of about £5, you could pick a book from their basket, which was like date with a book. And I chose this one, which says London Tough Real Life Booker Nominated. Now, one of the reasons why I picked this book is I don't think I have the best impression of the Booker Prize, because I've only ever read one other Booker book and I didn't really like it. So the chances of me having this book is probably slim. However, I want to give the Booker Prize books another chance, because I'm sure I'm missing out on something. But yeah, I had read Orbital earlier this year, and I think I knew before I got into the book that it wasn't really for me, but my book club had selected it as their monthly book read, so I felt that I had to read it, and it was kind of as I thought it was. It just wasn't a book for me. It didn't really have the kind of storyline that I enjoyed. Now obviously it's been Booker nominated and it sold millions of copies worldwide, so I know there's loads of people out there that really appreciate that book. But when I'm looking at book awards, it tends to be more like the Pulitzer Prize or the Women's Prize for Fiction that normally draw me in, that I know that I really, really enjoy those books. However, this one says it's Booker nominated. So I thought we could open it together and we could see, hopefully I don't have the book, and we could see what it is. I'm not going to probably know anything about this book, so yeah, let's get on with opening it. What is it? So we have Who They Was by Gabrielle Krause. So let's just read the insert, because I have never heard of this book. This is a story of London you won't find in any guidebooks. This is a story about what it's like to exist in the moment, about boys too eager to become men, growing up in the hidden war zones of big cities, and the girls trying to make it their own way. This is a story of reputations made and lost, of violence and vengeance, and never counting the cost. This is a story of concrete towers and blank-eyed windows, of endless nights in police stations and prison cells, of brotherhood and betrayal. This is about the boredom, the rush, the despair, the fear and the hope. This is about what's left behind. Okay, that actually sounds quite compelling. I do like a little bit of a gritty drama. So yeah, to be honest, if I'd picked this up and read the insert, I might have been attracted towards reading this. So we'll definitely add it into the TBR pile. And I think I'm probably going to have to go online and just have a look up at some existing reviews, maybe go and look at Goodreads and just see when this was. I mean, this was the 2020 Booker Prize when it was longlisted, so it was about 5 years ago. But no, yeah, I've never seen it or never heard of it. Let me know in the comments down below if you've actually read this book or if you've heard anything about this book and what you kind of think about it. That would be interesting. So that's all I've got for today's video. As I said, just wanted to have a little chat about the Stratford Literary Festival and just a bit of a shout out to it for having such a good, you know, what would you call it? Range of authors that are doing chats. Everybody there looked like they were having a good time. Everybody had seen like multiple sessions out of the people that I had spoken to, and also like really did enjoy this date with the book thing as well. So yeah, hopefully we will talk to you very soon later this week. Have a great day. Bye.